Amber Belken was the kind of woman whose presence lit up a room. She was responsible, kind, and fiercely loved by her friends and family. So when she didn't show up for her shift one morning at the video game store where she worked as a manager, everyone immediately sensed that something was wrong. This wasn't like her. Amber was always early, always dependable. Calls started flooding her phone from the head office, but none were answered. Concern quickly escalated. When the store remained closed well past opening hours, they grew even more alarmed. They reached out to a neighboring business and asked an employee to walk over and see what was going on. A man named George agreed. When George arrived, everything about the store felt off. The doors were locked, the lights were out, and the place was silent. He looked through the windows but didn't see anything alarming. Still, the fact that Amber hadn't opened the store shocked everyone. Hours passed and they got even more worried. Later that day, another employee, Giovanni, was asked to check again. This time, when he got there, something had changed. He peered through the glass and saw someone inside. It was Brandon, another coworker. But instead of giving answers, Brandon's presence only raised more questions. But before we go further, welcome to Crime Uncovered, where every case has a story, and the truth is often stranger and darker than fiction. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that button to stay updated on the latest true crime cases we uncover. And to our returning subscribers, thank you for your continued support. Don't forget to like this video so it reaches more people who care about the truth behind the headlines. I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. So back to the case. The store was in total disarray. Video game boxes and merchandise were scattered all over the floor. The cash register was open with money spilling out. At first glance, it looked like a robbery, but it didn't feel like a normal one. When Giovanni entered the shop, he found Brandon standing in the dark, seemingly unfazed by the chaos. Still, what he discovered next was something no one was prepared for. He walked into the manager's office to check the safe and froze. On the ground lay a body. A plastic bag was wrapped tightly around the head. It was Amber, and what had looked like a simple robbery had suddenly become something much darker, more personal, and deeply unsettling. But as investigators arrived and began piecing things together, it quickly became clear that this wasn't just about stolen money. It was about betrayal, secrets, and something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Police arrived swiftly and secured the store, but the deeper they looked, the more confusing the scene became. Amber's lifeless body lay on the office floor, the plastic bag still clinging to her face. There were signs of a struggle, faint bruising, disarrayed clothing, but nothing definitive. The safe was nearly empty, and cash was scattered across the front counter. Several high-value electronics were also missing, around 50 video game discs, an Xbox, and a few PlayStations, totaling about $6,000 in stolen goods. Amber's car was parked outside with the driver's door flung open. Her phone sat on the front seat, untouched. Nothing had been taken from the car. If robbery was the motive, why leave valuables behind? Why leave the car wide open? And most importantly, how did the killer get out without being seen? Giovanni, the employee who found the body, told detectives that both the front and back doors were locked when he arrived. That detail stuck with investigators. Whoever committed the crime had to know the store's layout and routine well enough to enter and leave without drawing suspicion. The medical examiner later confirmed that Amber had died of asphyxiation. The killer had suffocated her by holding a plastic bag tightly over her head. She had fought back. There were bruises and scratches, but it wasn't enough. Duct tape residue on her wrists revealed she'd been restrained at some point, although the tape had been removed before her body was discovered. As detectives dug deeper, Amber's co-workers shared that she usually arrived an hour early each morning. Her daily routine was clockwork. She'd open the store at 9 a.m., take the previous day's money from the safe, and head to the bank. That meant the killer had likely struck almost immediately after she walked through the door. Another clue came from a phone call. A manager from another store had briefly spoken with Amber around 9 a.m. that day. The conversation was short. Amber told him she had just arrived and needed to go. Minutes later, she was likely already under attack. The violence didn't line up with a simple robbery. Amber had already opened the safe. There would have been no need to hurt her unless there was something more. Most smash-and-grab thieves don't strangle their victims. Strangulation, investigators knew, was intimate, personal, driven by rage or fear of being recognized. And then there was the back door. It wasn't just any exit. It opened into an alley lined with identical doors from other businesses. A stranger wouldn't know which led where, but someone familiar with the building would. Police began to suspect that this was no random crime. It was calculated, intentional, possibly committed by someone Amber knew, and maybe even trusted. And if that were true, then the person who ended Amber's life wasn't a masked stranger in the night. It was someone who may have stood beside her at work. As detectives started mapping out possible suspects, one name kept resurfacing: Brandon Harbour. He was the employee Giovanni had seen inside the store, standing amid the chaos, strangely calm. When questioned, Brandon claimed he'd arrived just minutes earlier, saw the mess, and assumed the closing crew had forgotten to clean up. He insisted he didn't enter the manager's office and had no idea Amber's body was lying just a few feet away. To investigators, his story felt too convenient. Brandon knew the store inside out. How could he not notice the destruction around him or the silence that filled the air? Even stranger, despite the darkness, he hadn't turned on any lights and made no effort to call anyone for help. Something wasn't adding up. His behavior was one red flag. Another was Amber's own complaints. According to her coworkers and family, she had grown increasingly frustrated with Brandon's performance at work. He often missed tasks, ignored responsibilities, and generally made her job harder. Things escalated to the point that Amber planned to file an official complaint with management, and that complaint was supposed to be submitted on the very morning she died. That detail hit detectives like a thunderclap. The timing was chilling. If Brandon knew he was on the verge of losing his job, could he have snapped? Despite the growing suspicions, detectives were faced with a frustrating reality. They had no physical evidence tying Brandon to the crime. His home, vehicle, and personal belongings were searched meticulously. Not a single stolen item turned up. No trace of duct tape. No matching fingerprints. Nothing to directly connect him to Amber's murder. Phone records revealed another twist. According to his cellular data, Brandon wasn't even near the store when Amber was attacked. His location didn't register in the area until around 2 p.m., hours after Amber was already dead. Still, investigators weren't ready to let go. Brandon told them he had spent the morning helping his fiancée and her parents with errands. That alibi checked out. Each person confirmed his presence. Even so, police dug deeper, verifying every moment of his morning down to the smallest detail. Meanwhile, tensions escalated. Brandon, though never formally arrested, was treated like a suspect. Police allegedly pressured his fiancée to turn on him, warning her that she could be sleeping beside a killer. They told her she could be next. But despite their efforts, they couldn't shake Brandon's airtight alibi. With heavy reluctance, the detectives had to face a bitter truth. He wasn't their guy. But just as they were forced to look elsewhere, another name began to creep into the shadows, one that had been quietly present all along. After weeks of chasing dead ends, the case teetered on the edge of going cold. With no fingerprints, no surveillance footage, and no definitive suspect, the energy behind the investigation began to stall. The investigators promised a $100,000 reward to anyone who had useful information about the murder, most of it contributed by the video game store chain that had employed Amber. Public pleas were made. Her grieving parents stood in front of cameras begging for justice. But still, nothing came. Then, nearly 7 months after Amber's murder, the phone rang. On the other end was a man who wouldn't give his name. His voice was cautious, uncertain, but what he claimed to know could change everything. He told detectives that a friend of his, someone who worked at the same store chain as Amber, had approached him the day before the murder with a proposition: help pull off a small theft. The caller had refused, thinking it was just a dumb idea. But when news broke that Amber had been found dead the next day, he immediately realized who was behind it. The friend's name? Giovanni Jaramillo. Even more disturbing was what happened next. According to the caller, he met up with Giovanni the day after Amber's death, and during that conversation, Giovanni confessed. No hesitation, no remorse. He allegedly said outright, "I killed her." The witness had stayed quiet out of fear. He knew Giovanni well enough to be afraid of retaliation, especially knowing that Amber had trusted him enough to let him into the store without hesitation. Giovanni had worked with her. He knew her schedule, her routines. He would have known there were no cameras, no alarms, no eyewitnesses. Police immediately brought Giovanni in for questioning. He denied everything. His demeanor was controlled, his story consistent. He claimed he had nothing to do with the crime. Detectives pushed, but he never flinched. There was no confession, no breakdown, and, just like before, no physical evidence. Still, suspicion was mounting. Investigators decided to press further. As a final tactic, they requested a DNA sample, hoping that just the idea of it might be enough to make him slip. Although they didn't recover any useful biological evidence from the crime scene, they believed the pressure alone might rattle him. But Giovanni complied. Calmly, quietly, and just when it seemed he had nothing to hide, something else happened. The very next day he vanished, along with his entire family. Giovanni's disappearance was both sudden and strategic. When officers returned to collect a DNA sample, hoping to rattle him, he complied without resistance. But the very next day, he and his entire family vanished. They didn't just leave town. They left behind their home, routines, and lives, heading straight for the border. Police suspected he was heading to Mexico via Laredo, Texas, but without hard evidence, they couldn't stop him. There was no arrest warrant yet, and no biological proof linking him to the crime scene. For months, law enforcement hit dead ends. The case went cold. Amber's loved ones were devastated. Detectives tried to find new leads, but nothing stuck. It seemed Giovanni had disappeared for good. Then, 18 months later, in June 2008, a call changed everything. It was from Veronica, Giovanni's wife. At first, she hadn't believed her husband could be capable of such violence. But when detectives came to collect his DNA, she started to question everything. As soon as they left, Giovanni packed up their belongings and insisted they leave town immediately. When she pressed him, he admitted, "They think I killed someone." When she asked directly if he had, he said, "Yes." Veronica was terrified. For years, she had lived in fear of him. He was abusive, controlling, and violent, even sexually assaulting her with duct tape to restrain her, all while their children were nearby in their small one-bedroom apartment. She stayed quiet to protect herself and the kids. But when she finally found the courage to confront him again about Amber, Giovanni confirmed it. He had killed her. He told Veronica it happened during a robbery, and he wasn't planning to turn himself in. When she said she was leaving him, Giovanni tried to lure her into a trap, pretending they'd talk it out over coffee, only to drive her to a remote location, pull a gun, and threaten to kill her. He then shockingly handed her the weapon, daring her to shoot him. She refused, convincing him their children didn't deserve to lose both parents. He drove her back, but it was the last straw. Veronica took the kids and left. When she was safe, she called the police and gave them the full story. From there, the case reignited. The district attorney approved an arrest warrant. Detectives worked with U.S. Marshals and Mexican authorities, placing Giovanni on the 15 most wanted list. After about 2 weeks of international cooperation, Mexican officials tracked him down, just miles from the U.S. border. And in a bitter twist of irony, when they found him, he was playing a video game, one of the same games stolen from the store on the day Amber died. Due to extradition laws, Mexico agreed to send him back to Texas on the condition that the death penalty be removed from the table. Prosecutors agreed. Now back on U.S. soil, Giovanni had only one option left: face justice. With mounting pressure from investigators and the weight of a murder charge hanging over him, Giovanni Rivera finally caved. In a calculated decision, he accepted a plea deal, confessing to Amber Belken's murder in exchange for a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years. It was the only way to avoid a potential death sentence, which prosecutors had been actively pursuing. During his official confession, Giovanni laid out a version of events that chilled everyone in the room. In a flat, almost mechanical tone, he claimed he hadn't lost his job or fallen on desperate times. He just wanted quick money. He saw the opportunity at EB Games and took it, knowing the store's routines, security blind spots, and more importantly, Amber's work schedule. She was the manager. She trusted him, and she was scheduled to be alone that morning. According to Giovanni, the plan was only to rob the store. He had expected Amber to comply, grab the cash, and walk away. But things didn't go according to plan. Once inside, Amber reportedly hesitated, perhaps realizing something was off, or maybe recognizing him beneath the hood he wore. That moment of recognition, he said, sent him into a panic. She initially did as she was told. He admitted to that. But when she reached for the phone, possibly trying to alert someone or call for help, Giovanni claimed he snapped. He said he strangled her with his bare hands, silencing her in a desperate effort to keep the robbery from unraveling. But the detectives listening to his confession weren't convinced. His tone lacked emotion. His details were carefully constructed but didn't line up with what they already knew. For one, Amber hadn't just been strangled. Her body had been found bound with zip ties around her wrists and ankles. Materials investigators knew Giovanni had brought with him. That wasn't improvisation. That was preparation. To them, the act wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was a cold, calculated attack. He had entered that store fully equipped to neutralize any resistance, even if it meant killing someone he once called a friend. Giovanni went on to say he'd felt a brief pang of guilt after the murder. He claimed he considered turning himself in, especially in the days immediately following Amber's death. But instead, he ran. His family, according to his statement, had helped him escape, smuggling him out of Texas and across the border into Mexico. He spent over a year hiding out with relatives, living under the radar, until law enforcement finally caught up to him. The trial was avoided through the plea deal, but Amber's family still sat in court to hear the sentencing and final statements. Prosecutors made it clear, this wasn't a crime of passion or an accident. It was a deliberate act. Giovanni had lied, manipulated, and hidden for years. He stole Amber's life for a few $100s, and never once showed a shred of remorse. Amber's mother, through tears, described the heartbreak of losing her daughter so suddenly, so senselessly. She vowed to keep fighting to ensure Giovanni never saw the outside of a prison cell again. The community stood behind them. What happened to Amber was a tragedy that touched everyone. And now, at last, there was accountability. With Giovanni Jaramillo finally in custody and facing justice, the Belken family could begin the painful journey of healing. He had accepted a plea deal and would now spend the rest of his life in prison. A sentence that, while it didn't bring Amber back, at least ensured her killer would never walk free again. But closure was something far more elusive. Amber Belken was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. Her kindness, her ambition, and her infectious energy left a lasting imprint on everyone who knew her. The senseless way her life was taken, inside the very place where she worked and felt safe, left deep scars on her family, friends, and community. Even in the courtroom, Giovanni had shown little remorse. His confession was chilling not only for its details, but for the emotion it lacked. He didn't break down. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He simply recounted the events that ended Amber's life with cold detachment, blaming panic and impulse, while investigators saw it as calculated and cruel. For Amber's family, every day without her is a reminder of what was stolen. Not just a daughter, but the dreams she carried, the milestones she never got to reach, and the laughter she once filled their home with. The pain didn't end with a sentence. It only shifted. Her family has since created a scholarship in her honor and continues to share her story to raise awareness about domestic violence and victim advocacy. Through them, Amber's legacy lives on, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience, truth, and hope. And though the scars remain, so does the strength of everyone who fought to make her voice heard. Thank you for watching. Every victim deserves their story told. If you found this story shocking and heartbreaking, subscribe to Crime Uncovered and help keep their memory alive. What do you think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, keep questioning everything.